Welcome everyone back to our YouTube video demos. We miss all of you and we hope to see you all soon, but we're going to go over one of my favorite tools, and many of you know that. Some of you this will be new for, is the Stripology Rulers. So this was the original ruler that was designed by Gudrun Erla for, she's GE Designs, and Creative Grids came out and made her ruler. And they do a wonderful job with their rulers. The grip on the back of them is really what makes a difference on the back of this one compared to the old June Taylor one. Plus there's extra markings of dark and light lines, and at the bottom you'll see, so we got slits every ½ inch from 0 to 20. We have the solid lines are just the 1 inch increments. The 1½ inch increments are the stars right across up to 19½. And then we've got our 2½ inch, which are great. They're the squares that are every 2½ inches, so you'll get 10 of those, sorry, 8 of those across to 20 inches. The white box here delineates 10-inch square on that one. And then you've got a 45-degree line this way and your 60-degree line this way, which allows for triangles or your 60-degree cuts. So that was the original. I'm going to show you the other two, but we'll have a second video that details these more. This was the second one that was designed, and it was called Stripology Squared. So now it's a more manageable size, but it's less cuts. So if I'm doing multiple cuts where I need to cut 28 1½ inch strips, I'm going to use this one. If I have 4 or 5, I might use this one if I've got the option of both. So this one is the Stripology Squared, and the reason being you've got the 45-degree lines running all through here and in one direction here. So from the dark lines are the even numbered squares, and working from the center out in the white lines, they work this way out with the ½ inch squares. So there's a lot of lines there. And it was confusing at first to me, but now it's not an issue because I know what they're all for. Okay, so that was the second ruler. It's a little taller if you compare the two, which is actually nice. It gives you a little bit more leverage in where you start cutting the bottom of your fabric. And then after that one, she came out with the mini version, Stripology Mini Squared, and that is up to 6½ inches squared. Oops, I should show it that way. There's a lot of numbers on this part, and I'll explain that at a later date, but you again have the mini version where your even squares are black, and working from the center out are your smaller ones. So now you've got the 2½ and 3½ are added in. So the 4½, 5½, 6½ are overlaps, but this is a much more manageable size. And we can also get into cutting with 1/8 of an inch cuts with this ruler, which I will discuss later. The last one that was designed is the newest, and probably, well, I won't say last one, but who knows with the designers. This is a combination of the original ruler and the large squared ruler. So now we've got the same markings on the bottom. We've got now the square, with the even cuts squares on this side up to 12 inches, and then up to 12½ inches, starting at 4½ and working your way out for that one. What they have also added in, we have the 45 and 60-degree lines like we did on the original. Now we have them in the opposing direction, which allows you to cut hexagon shapes, and I will demonstrate that later. The other thing they've added on, turn it over, and now when I'm cutting my ½ inch blocks, my squares, I can actually use the bottom one. So if I was doing a 6½ inch square, I would cut it 6½ there, 6½ there, which lines up with my 6½ inch squares here. And that's a really handy feature that wasn't on the original. And what she's also added in, you have dotted lines. This is a 1/4 inch, ½ inch, and 3/4 inch, and that happens on both sides of the ruler. So those are extra lines that can be used. There's also lines at the top, and I have not even used those yet because I haven't had to. What I want to talk about though is how you start cutting with these, because that's the biggest question people have when they first get them. So when you're working with the slits, I'm gonna put, does that show this a bit better? There's our teardrop shape, and that's where we're gonna start with our cutter. And there's one at the beginning of your cutting, and then there's one at the end of the cuts. Okay, so big thing with your rotary cutter, whenever you're cutting any cutting, you wanna make sure that you keep your wrist up to keep your blade in contact fully. Because if I drop this down, I'm touching actually the plastic at the end. So I gotta make sure I keep my wrist up and go right through. Sharp blade, hugely important. And we love the endurance blades. Your regular Olfa blades are great. These ones are the endurance ones, and they do last, I swear, twice as long. So just don't nick a pin, because they will do the same thing as your old blades. The 60 millimeter, this is great for, well, actually on the packaging it says up to 12 layers. I know I've done 10. Gudrun Erla suggests up to 8. So you have to decide. Remember, they are very sharp and you're putting more pressure on more layers, so you want to be careful. And this one is up to 4 layers, but I must admit I've done up to 6 with my 45 millimeter one. So great tools as well that we all know we need. I don't think I ever would have quilted with scissors. These are ruler stickers that are for any ruler. They can be just placed down, and they're not a sticky, they're just like a peel down and replace. They're kind of a plasticky sticker. They're reusable, and you can also stick them back onto your little mat here where they're attached to, if you're not wanting to use them at all. I tend to just leave them in place and then move them around once I'm done, but great for other rulers. And you have 6 colors now. 3 colors in the Fiesta group, and there's blue, green, and pink, can't see them, in this package, which was the original one. All right, so for cutting, I'm going to show you just some basic tips. This is a quilt that I need to get sashing for. They're hexagon blocks, and they're going to be separated with sashing all the way around them. So there's lots of background cuts I need to make, and that's the great part about this ruler. So here's our fabric. You're going to iron it just like you normally would. Then you're going to hold it up. Now this is a shorter piece I had left over that I know I can make some cuts out of. I'm going to move this out of the way. Handling the rulers, make sure you're picking them up from the middle. If I pick up from here, you can see there's a lot of flimsiness. So grab them where it's more solid and set it down carefully. You don't want to hit anything where it will cause stress breaks. So I'm going to shake that down, and like we always do with our fabric, we want to get a flat edge at the bottom. So let it drape, place it on the mat, and in a minute I'll show you this mat, but I've got lines that are running really close. They're 1/2 inch, but no extra markings there, so you're not distracted. And they are 1/2 inch going vertically. Horizontally vertically we've got the 1 inch marks. Horizontally we've got 1/2 inch marks. So all I'm using this for is a guide to make sure that I've got this bottom part flat, and I can smooth that out. Now my little trick has been, because we have to double fold this to cut, I'm going to pull it towards me, and I'm going to try and do it as straight as I can. And then what I'm doing is I want to cover that selvage edge, so I find a line that's exposed above it, and then I come up to that line like that. Okay, so what I'm wanting to get, we want this to run parallel, because what happens is with these folds, it's not going to matter if I'm making subcuts. So if I'm cutting an 1.5 inch strip and then I'm subcutting smaller pieces, it won't matter. But sometimes we can get a little bit of a wow or a little elbow, and that's because that fabric doesn't get folded straight. So what I'm looking at here, and what's really nice, is I've got black and white lines. Now the white line you can see just disappears there, doesn't it? So now I'm going to pull this down so the black line sits on there. I'm also looking over here. This will be my first cut line on the 0, and that's like cutting our initial cut off on the right. We're actually cutting on the left now. You do want to check, take a look, how much fabric allowance do I have here? And these ones are pretty even, so I can get fairly close to that. But sometimes, like anytime, you've got to watch how that works. So now I can scoot that down right here, fairly close to the edge, because I can cut that off. Now I want to look at the top here, and And actually, you can't see this white line very well, but I can see that actually it's really even across the top. So I'm actually good to go there. I need 5 1.5 inch strips. So what I'm going to do, when I first start cutting, I'm going to hold down my fabric. I need to hold that edge down, and this will grab it. I'm going to go sideways into my teardrop till it clicks, and then I'm going to hold my, and going straight up and straight through. Now if I don't think I got it, I can come back, and because nothing shifts. Okay, and now 1.5 inches. Now I scooted my hand over a little bit, and I'm going to scoot again, but watch, there's my 3-inch line. I don't want to scoot too far because then I would cut my finger. And I've never gotten close, but I just try and caution you. Just move your hand, but still keep it back. So 3 inches, 4.5. Again, I could look at the stars and not even count. 6, 7.5. And then I've got this little bit left over. So what I always like to do with anything is I find my next cut that's probably, or hopefully, going to grab the rest of it, because I can either throw it in a bin. So there's my excess. Very little waste when we're doing this, because I can take care of, I've got a bin of 1-inch strips, which are great for flanges, and there's my leftovers from that. So that goes in my project. There are subcuts to make out of this later, and that will go in a 1-inch bin. So that's for the 1-inch. If I was doing, well, let's do this one, the larger one. This is 3 4.5 inch pieces that I need. So again, it's going to be the same, and I'd done this earlier, so it's going to be flush along the bottom. And there's my little tag, 3 by 4.5. So again, that trick is pulling it towards you. Get a line just above the selvage because you just want to cover that selvage. And this goes for the 3 larger rulers. The regular one, the extra large, and the squared one is the way you would fold these. So now, again, first of all, checking how much leeway do I have. Quite a bit there. I'm going to use a black line again on my fabric, so that's what I can do there. And I go to the top, and again, I've got really nice straight cuts. So it's parallel between these top and bottom edges, okay? And then if I'm doing 4.5, this is where I could move my stickers if I wanted. Because if I was doing repetitive cuts and doing 10 different ones or the same one, that's where these are handy. So it would be 4.5, 9. Oh, and I just happen to have it at 13.5 already then. And then all I have to do is cut at my 0. So that's where you always start. So that's your evening up edge. Keeping my wrist up, you can hear it slicing through. And then I go sideways in, up, 4.5. See how fast those stickers make it? Because I can just go across. And again, oh, I slipped there. Now I've got those little bits, another 1 inch, and then I've got my 3 4.5 inch cuts for that. And then this one I'm not going to do, but this is, I've labeled on here. This is what I love for the background cuts. 3 by 5.5, 2 by 1.5, so label them. Manageability of size of fabric. 1 meter, which would take up basically my mat, is the maximum I would work with. Otherwise, what I would do, if I knew I had 3 5.5 inch strips, 3 times 5.5 is 16.5 inches. I would take my fabric out, and I would use my lines on my mat for that, and I would cut about 17 inches. Not anything else. If you know it's wonky, you might want a bit more, but you can see how efficient this ruler is, so you don't have to worry about having lots of extra. So I'd cut a chunk of fabric off to fit my cuts if I had 5 meters of my background fabric. And I've done that quite often. Anyone who's done the labyrinth knows that there are lots of 1.25 inch cuts, which we'll talk about later. So I am also going to show you same project. This was a 4.5 inch strip that was cut. I actually cut this angle with my Creative Grid 60 degree, but I want to show you how I can take this ruler. I can do this in two ways actually. Can you see the lines on the mat? These are 60-degree lines. So I could lay the strip along there like that. And in doing that, I could also line it up now on my 60-degree line. And if you can see how that cut matches it. So this ruler will also work when you need to do a 60-degree cut. So that was the angle that needed to be started on us. And then after that, what you're doing is from that point, you line it up like this, and I need 1.5 inch strips. So all I need to do now is the same cutting, 1.5, and I'll just cut a couple for you. See, my label under there says 1.5, so I'll just do the 2. And these are, because there's together, wrong sides together, I'm getting my 2, they're not identical. You've got 2 different directions, and I need 2 different directions for this project, so I'll be cutting them like that right across my strip set. And how quick is that? Now I can stack up several of these on top of each other as well, up to 4 strips if I wanted to do the 8 layers. And so efficiency with this ruler is amazing. So that works for that one. I am going to show you. I've got a project like this. This was a project. Here's the panel. So if you take a look, all these little squares are 2.5 inch squares. This panel project called for charm squares, and you're cutting them up. Well, I thought you can do the same thing with a layer cake to get the same, but I think a little bit faster this way too. So what I'm going to show you is I can take my 10-inch square, and I can use any of my rulers, place it underneath. So there's my 0 and there's my 10. Now this is the nice thing about pre-cuts. If I'm wanting, some of us don't like to have all those extra edges. I can kind of see here the little serrated pinked edge there. Now, modas are pretty consistent. There's not too much. They have a really fine one, but there's different lines that have quite a bit. So the first thing I can do is if I want, I can trim those off. There was a little bit. I don't know if there's much on this side. Nope. So there's nothing going on there. So what I need to do is cut 2.5 inch increments. So I would stack up. I had 8 of these done the other day, but I've got them all cut. So this is a sample one. 5 and 7.5. Okay, so what that looked like look at that. You can't even tell they're cut at first. But I want to show you, this is the stack that I had done the other day, and I left them stacked up. And so it was done exactly the same way, and that's what they looked like. So how many layers is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was able to do that with the 45mm cutter, okay? Then what I went through, I had several of these. You're pairing them up, and you're sewing them into groups of 2, and then you'll do all of them. And then once you've got your groups of 2, you're going to put those into groups of 4. Here are my groups of 4 sewn together. Now, to make 2.5 inch squares, well, now I just have to cut them this way into 2.5 inch strips. Now, how quick was that? As opposed to cutting a bunch of 2.5 inch squares and sewing them together. So I am going to stack these again. Now I can just stack them like this, and that would be layers. Now I've got seams involved now. It doesn't matter which way. If you've got the option, the best way to go is with your seam. But this one's going this way, that one's going that way, that one's going that way. So it's not really going to make a difference, whoops, on these projects. So again, that one's running that way against. So you can choose, you could kind of figure out which one had the most, but I wouldn't worry about it if you've got a sharp blade. Now instead of stacking a ton like on top of each other, I can start offsetting them. So see how I've gone up? I've used a line up here, and I put this one. So I've now offset these ones. And this is for any strips that you're doing. This wouldn't matter. Now I'm trying to keep them as square as I can, and you can see some of them are a little bit longer. That was probably my sewing when I was lining up the first time around. So, and I can just gradually offset each of them, but you have to remember you can only go so far with your offset because you will run out of space that your ruler will fit. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler on top, and it's the same thing. I'm going to go, the 0 has to be close to the edge and the 10. Okay. And this is where I might pick up now my 60 degree. And this is where we're going to see, this is my bottom edge here, and there's my top edge. So see how close now I am to my teardrops? I couldn't go any higher than this one for laying out my offset. So I can actually work from up here if I wanted to. So there's, I just have to make sure, because the numbers are different up here, that I'm still hitting my 10-inch line. So if I wanted to come towards me, I could. And that's just taking anything off. And then I can go to my 7.5. Or look at my squares. Now you do want to use firm pressure. I'm going through seams. Oh, this is a nice sharp blade. Thanks to Joanne. 5. And 2.5. Now I want you to remember, what would you be doing right now with your regular rulers, and how would you have to be stacking these? This held them all in place. Can you see my cuts? Nope. Look at that. So now I've got them all done, and for that pattern, I'm just going to be joining them. I've got other ones here. These are my single ones to make. These are my other single ones cut. So they're just getting pieced together in rows of 3 or 4 to go around my blocks. So really, really fast. I could also play with this, and I could put them together, and I could do blocks like that and sash them and have another quilt done, which is something I might do with some leftovers, which is another YouTube to show you later. So that's how you can also do subcuts with your Stripology ruler. And as anyone who's familiar with me, they see there's more stuff to finish now. Love these containers from the dollar store. They're about $4 each, and they're great project containers, so that's a handy one. Next one to show you with strips is this project here, and it's in the store, this quilt. And I don't know, you can see, but in this picture here, there's little 4 patches. Those are created by 1.5-inch strips. So here's my 1.5. I've already cut them with the Stripology ruler. And I made them shorter so that I could get more variety, and I'll show you what I mean. I've got 2 of each of these greens. So I'm going to pair up that one with that one. So I've got 3 different sets of 2. Okay. Now this would work for 4 patches or even 9-patch sewing. I've got the seam running, the dark one running that way up there. So my seam's like that. This one will go right sides together. And because it's pressed this way, they're going to butt out really nicely together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually feel for that line, because that's, and if you see that I'm off a little bit, that's all to do with my sewing. So no one's perfect. There's another one. So I'm using the line on the mat as a guide to put it down, because it's going to help me when I want to keep these fairly even. Oops, now this one. And if you're thinking, oh, this is taking time to do, you'll see why it's so well worth it. And then the last one. And on top of it, and those are pretty good actually. My sewing wasn't too bad. Okay, so my ruler will go down. Now, these were 1.5-inch strips. My increments are 1.5 inches as well, if I'm doing a 4-patch. I could be doing something else with these, and they might have needed to be longer, then you just cut them accordingly. So now I'm going to line up a dark line along the bottom. Just make sure I've got all those strip sets even, and I just might move the center one just a little bit up. But that's just the end. See the wave on this one? And I think that's just the nature of my sewing, so I probably won't even use that end piece. Okay. again, I've just got this one down here that must have shifted when I laid them out. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my 0 line again. Okay, and I'm going to trim, these are the excess. I could have even gone tighter, and now I'm going to go the 1.5 inches again. You can hear the cuts. Sideways in each time, right? Sideways. And you'll get really good at this, and you want to get sideways in and push first before you get going. Even though there's no fabric there, I still want to go straight through them. And I think that's my last one. So those will be leftovers. Or not leftovers, I'm not saving those, people. Okay, as much as I am a saver of stuff. Now, what I want to show you though, I've got all of these done. And why did I take the time to stack them like that? Because I'm just going to go to my sewing machine. I'm stacking all of those. And I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch. Because look, they're all perfectly butted up, ready to go. And how many will that give me? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times 3, I get 27 little 4 patches already pre-done. So pretty slick. It does cut your time. And the more you use the ruler, the more you're going to find how that ruler can help you. So when I was showing those 4 patches, I can do that. I'm not going to cut them for you, but these were 2.5 inch strips. So I would take, if I was just doing black and red, I would stack them on top of each other. And now, and then, oops, I can feel they're not butted up. That's the nice part about the seams. So then, of course, I'd cut here, and they'd be 2.5 inch increments. That was 1.5. This would be 2.5 to get my 4 patches done up, and really, really fast. The other one you can do here, I'll just show you. This one shows if I was doing 16 pouches, take a look at those little, so all the strips were cut, and I'm not going to show you the cutting. These were 1.5 inch strips. Increments are 1.5 inches, so I get lots of them made. And then look, I've got these really sweet little 16 patches that I could sash and put together. This is great to do with your 1.5 inch strips. You could just make a bunch of them, have blocks set aside, and put a scrap quilt together. And done quickly. Okay, last thing to show you today is binding. And if you notice, I'm not the 2.5 inch, I'm the 2 1/4. Well, what's the problem with 2 1/4 on this ruler? We have 1/2 inch cuts. Well, there is a trick. Now, it's included in your rulers when you purchase the ruler. I've also taken the same chart and enlarged it, and this is also available online. She has online the printout full sheets that you can do. So this just has 1 1/4, 1 3/4, sorry, the print's not good, 2 1/4, 2 3/4, 3 1/4, 3 3/4. I could continue on. What she does though is that I do 2 1/4. Our first cuts, 4.5, 9, 13.5, and 18. What happens if you notice 2 1/4 times 2 is 4.5. Those are your increments all the way through. So that's your first cut. So we'll do that. Take that off. So we've shaken it down again. Hopefully it's still okay after I've done it. So I'm on the mat, and then push out your fabric from there so you're not. And I'm going to pull it towards me. I'll go to that line and cover it. So I'm meeting up with a line there at the top, and so when I put my, I know I've got to cut away a little bit. You can see this is where this happens when your selvage isn't really straight with your cut. So you do want to press and shake that out. Now I can use a white or a dark line on this one, and I'm going to scoot that down to there. And I am good, both top and bottom, really parallel. So that little trick has been my saving grace. It's been awesome. So now I'm going to cut, what were those intervals? It was 0, 4.5. And again, you could mark these on your ruler if you wanted, but so but the funny thing is, those other cuts I showed you are the same cuts. 9, 13.5, and 18. Love is really close. Actually, I only need 7. I think I'm going to get 8. That shows you how efficient this is. Now, the trick here to your 1/4 inch ones. You can see this dotted line. I'm going to back my fabric up. So this is where I cut it. Oh, this is the other tip. Sorry, while I'm in the middle of this. There's a cut line here. If I'm needing to butt this back up to that fabric, I actually will get on top. So it's inside of this cut here, so it's on top of it. And then I gently push the ruler into it. And it stops flush with that edge. So now I'm ready to continue cutting if I've cut that at a straight edge. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift it up, and then I'm putting the dotted line on where I first cut. Okay, so now I'm also going to put a white line on the bottom of so I have it all straight, ready to go. So I'm just making sure this line now is straight right across the bottom of my fold, and I've got the dotted line flush with my last cut line. So if I add a 1/4 inch, so I'm a 1/4 inch to 0, then at 2 inches, that's a 2 1/4 inch cut. And if you go back to the chart, it says move the ruler a 1/4 inch and cut at 2. And then again, we're doing the 4.5 inch increments after that. 6.5, 11, 15.5, and 20. So now I'm going to cut at 2. 6.5. And you don't want to make a mistake on these. So what you could do with your stickers too is I could do purple for this color. The 18 would have been there. And then I could do one of my other colors for the second cuts, and that would be helpful too. So where was I at? 11, 15.5, and that'll be my last one because I don't have all that fabric left. And now, like I said, very little waste. We took away that first little bit the first time because we had to line that up with a 1/4 inch. But now I've got all my binding strips ready to go. Really quick. So the last thing I want to show you is this mat that goes with the Stripology Rulers. Well, with any of your rulers, but it has been created with those lines. Like I said, they're running 1/2 inch. You've got your horizontal cuts. I'll show you the diamond cuts next time too, because you can do diamonds and hexagons. And this quilt here is, I did the whole quilt using the XL Stripology ruler. I used the, and she's got a little video actually online in a blog, because she did that one as a quilt along. So if you're needing to watch how she did it, but I will be showing you. So this is your one side, and this is the one I usually use. And then this side, for those of you, what I really find interesting here is it delineates the yardage. So 1/8, 1/4, 1/3, 3/8, 1/2 a yard, 5/8, 2/3, 3/4, 7/8, and of course 36 inches is your full yard. So if you're wondering on a pattern, what is 3/4 of a yard? You can actually look at your mat and go, oh, it's 27 inches. Perfect. I know what to do. So we will see you next time with some more Stripology tips. Take care till then.